Um, you know, I think, of course, first and foremost, the obvious one is the quarterback situation, and he did mention that Raiola has come in and with fire, with tenacity and wanting to be great. He said he's in there at 6 a.m. You know, before his 10 a.m. lift, working already at 6 a.m. And he said Danny Kalin's coming in and doing the same thing and really learning the football side of things and really working on ironing out specifics in terms of the things he needs to work on in terms of reading defenses and things like that. And then Harburg's fundamentals, Heinrich Harburg, they're trying to get the fundamentals in there for him. He mentioned specifically the way he keeps his elbow low when he throws. He needs to get that elbow up so he can get kind of that shoulder through and just kind of, so it's one of those things where it's like Harburg, if he learns to do those things, he will be a little bit better with the deep ball. So it's something where Harburg has been there as long as he is, but he still needs to develop in case his number's called. And he wants the guy who's, and in quotes he said this, who's going to be able to step up when nothing goes right in the game. And one of the games that I felt like that happened last year was the Illinois game, and Sonny's in here and he can attest to this, but that game, nothing went right for either team. Each team made a million mistakes. Neither team wanted to win. It was like turnover after turnover, nonstop back and forth. And those type of games are where he wants the guys who are going to step up and be like, no, I'm going to attack here. He mentioned getting pissed off and attacking. And the first person that popped into my head when I thought of that is Tom Brady. We all know Tom Brady, that little, all the pictures they shared where they get a sideline clip of him on the sideline with a minute left in the game, and it's like, okay, when you see this look, Tom Brady's about to come back and win this game. And he wants somebody with that extra, because last year and years prior, when you don't have a quarterback that you feel can score, like, and not even just score in the last drive of the game, but score in general. As soon as we lost the lead this year, I lost confidence that we were going to be able to come back and win any game just because of the inconsistent ability to score. And so when you have, it was relying on the defense to hopefully make a turnover, something had to happen, besides the quarterback making a play. There had to be a big breakout play or something like that. And what he's talking about is more so you want that cerebral, level-headed guy, calm mind, who's going to be able to be like, okay, here's where we are. I'm going to go win this game. No doubts. Not relying on any other. They're like, I'm going to go win this game no matter what happens. They're not going to get mad at their defense for giving up the lead. They're going to go out there and they're going to see it as a challenge to go out there and prove themselves. And that's the kind of quarterback and leader that he's looking for. So, and early indications, he says Raiola's in great shape for that. So that was kind of my first, really big storyline that I think everybody's going to kind of focus on. The next is really just kind of seeing how I think the new offensive pieces fit into place and how that might change the way the offense is run. Because last year, and it's going to be very vanilla in spring practice, as we know, but it might not be for Nebraska because, again, you got two true freshmen that you're going to be given a lot of reps. Who knows? They might just throw some schemes at them just to get them tested out there, and just to make sure that they're prepared with those. And so seeing how Satterfield's offense is going to look now that we have the ability to pass deep, we have running back depth to be able to establish, more of a run game with a deeper running back room and not risking, injury because we've lost our top two guys. And so just what this offense is going to look like, I've told people time and time again what it looked like last year, and trying to compare that into what we're going to see this coming year is just not, it's not accurate. Because if you look at his previous offenses, it's going to look different when he has the right personnel in place. He had to patchwork with what he had last year, and it didn't work. It didn't fit his offensive style, but Jamal Banks is in there now. Isaiah Nayer's in there now. You got Dante Dowdle in there now. You have a year of development of your offensive line. You have pieces in there as well. And so we finally get to see a little bit of what this offense is going to look like, as well as the positionless offense we've heard all spring or offseason about, the 49ers style of positionless offense. Now we kind of get to see, now that there's depth, we get to see some of these tight ends and see where they're going to move. Carter Nelson's going to line up in the backfield, how they're going to move the receivers around. Are they going to rotate? Where are they going to rotate? What are the rotations going to look like defensively too? Getting more depth in there for the defensive side of the ball. They're also going to be able to utilize more people differently. I've talked about it before, as when you look at Matt Rule's recruiting class, the linebackers, are very, very big in stature and can double as edge rushers. The edge rushers are very athletic. They can move back to linebacker. The defensive backs, safeties, they are big enough to move down to linebacker. The cornerbacks, Bly Hill, probably a little bit on the more longer, rangier side, a little bit slighter in frame. And so just seeing how he's going to move those guys around and how much movement there's going to be with the more depth, I think that's going to be a huge key. And then, I just think, lastly, we all want to see is just health and how this team can come into the year. Malachi Coleman, of course, is going to be late to the spring practices because of injury. So it's one of those things. It's like we also want to see how these injuries come along and see if we're going to be fully healthy coming into the season, because that is going to be necessary. We need all the depth that we can get in this upcoming Big Ten. And he even moved the spring game back a week. Because there's a little bit of, last year he said there was a little bit of a lull after the spring game, and there was a little bit of dead time, so he pushed it back a week, so that way they can give them more time to be able to get in their lift, work and develop and do the small things now that will make them competitive then, and just try to maximize the amount of time that they have. So
as we broaden our scope out to the Big Ten, with spring practice starting in a number of locations here in the last few weeks, or starting just here in the next few days, you bring up Iowa in particular. They start actually on Wednesday with their first spring practice. What comes to mind for me, Justin, is more so than in the past, because of the transfer portal, more quarterbacking changes across the conference and across college football than ever before, because there was always the graduation factor. But now with the transfer factor, last year, I believe, yes, every school in the Big Ten Western Division had a transfer quarterback except Minnesota starting last season.
And that was a mistake.
Now, Minnesota's quarterback is transferred to Rutgers. Nebraska's got a transfer quarterback. Ohio State.
Michigan's got a new quarterback.
Michigan's going to have a new quarterback. He's going to be a current quarterback, but
yeah, Alex. Well, potentially. Oh my gosh, what's his name? The top 166 quarterback. I forget his name.
Jaden Davis.
Jaden Davis. Sorry, yeah. So I believe, there could be a competition between Jaden Davis and Alex Orji, from what I've heard. But I think it's Alex Orji.
I think it could extend past that even. I think they've got 4 or 5 guys in play. Denegal, Orji, Tuttle, the old man in his 7th year, and Jaden Davis.
Yeah.
Maryland, no Talia Tagovailoa. Billy Edwards, their backup, most likely is going to win the job. So anyway, without going through every quarterback situation, that's one thing obviously to keep in mind, is that there are quarterback battles all across the conference. Or in the situation with Ohio State, more or less, they pretty much know who their quarterback is going to be. And so it's just about him acclimating himself. And Dylan Gabriel, we can't forget about our friends on the West Coast, of course, as Big Ten members. Dylan Gabriel to Oregon, Miller Moss taking the place of future number 1 pick Caleb Williams at USC, UCLA, and Washington without Michael Penix, now with Will Rogers in from Mississippi State. So all 4 schools incoming from the Pac-12 with different quarterbacks. So that's just going to be an every year theme all over the place within the conference. Um, Not necessarily a spring storyline, but we'll kind of put it on the back burner as we head into August camp, is going to be, for me, maybe the most interesting aspect of this season is simply who has the upper hand with the new Pac 12 teams taking on the existing old school Big Ten teams. Do they come in with a roar and take over and really show that this is a shot in the arm for the Big Ten? Or is the Big Ten and the old guard of the Big Ten going to beat them down a bit and hold them down? Because we're looking at Oregon and Washington, of course, as playoff teams last year. Oregon didn't make the playoff, but they were one of the 5 or 6 best teams in college football.
Yep.
And Washington, of course, a complete difficult to rate or rank or evaluate that addition to the Big Ten right out of the gate, because certainly it's a different team, more so than probably any team in the conference than it was last year. USC is completely retooled its defensive staff, trying to get better, trying to ready itself for the Big Ten. And UCLA is going to be a different program as well with a new head coach. So 3 out of the 4, or 2 out of the 4, with new head coaches, all 4 with different quarterbacks. Not necessarily a spring storyline, but I'm going to be running all sorts of measurements as to how good these teams are going to play against almost an exclusively old guard Big Ten schedule. So let's see, there's 9 games, there's 4 teams, 36 games. They're going to play each other. I guess there's going to be about 30 games there to measure the 4 from the Pac-12 against the new Big Ten, or the old Big Ten, to see who, because you know how it is. You guys had to play this role. I don't know if you felt it from the old guard of the Big Ten, even though once they step on the field, they're part of the Big Ten just as much as everybody else, technically.
Yeah.
But there's a source of pride that, okay, Nebraska, yeah, they're in the Big Ten, but we want to beat them down for a few years. We want to show that they need to earn their stripes in the Big Ten, that the Big Ten is superior to the Big 12.
Yep.
And so there was that thought about Nebraska. And for sure, that wasn't too tough to prove with Maryland and Rutgers. That certainly they got kicked in the head for a decade.
Yeah.
And are just starting to turn that around. But that's I don't know how you feel or the chat feels about kind of kicking around these new members of the Big Ten, but I think that's what a lot of people, that's how they feel.
We did a spring storyline, top 5 spring storylines, and I had what adjustments will Pac-12 teams make stylistically, if any, because some of the stuff we're hearing is well, from other teams reporters, that they feel like the Pac-12 style could come in and be successful, and maybe it'll be a little bit more adjustment for the Big Ten. But I don't think so. I think that's crazy talk. But will some of those teams be hesitant to make big changes? Will they try to come in and implement that system? And then which teams are going to be smart and try to balance that? Maybe put a mixture of what they know in there and just add some new wrinkles that won't set them back too much or hurt them too much with personnel. Like I think your Oregons will be doing that. I think Oregon's the type of team that's built to beat anybody with the way they run their offense and everything. And I think that's the model that some of these teams need to go with, is just trying to be balanced, because that's what a lot of Big Ten is. We talk about running the ball a lot, but it's just really balanced because everything's passing nowadays. It's the Big Ten runs the ball more because it's a pass-happy NFL. It's pass-happy college by the nature of the beast, because these players want to get to the NFL. So balance is key. And I want to see just how these teams balance their offenses. Even like Chip Kelly, I want to see how Chip Kelly, what he does with that offense, because he talked about, it's a collaborative effort and it's not his offense, it's Ohio State's offense. But how much of that is true? Chip Kelly I still think he's going to implement his stuff in there and stuff like that. And usually when you have multiple heads in the offense, sometimes that comes to a butting of heads and they're like, okay, we just need one guy calling the plays, that type of deal. So I'm curious to see how Chip Kelly does too, as far as offenses go, along with those other teams. Because the running back room they have there now, I feel like Ohio State could just run the hell out of the ball. And then just seeing how Will Howard fits in that offense too. It's that's one that I'm really curious to see.
Folks, we've got our Buckeye show. It's coming your way Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so a little bit early this week because of some schedule conflicts. So 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday on the Ohio State channel. And so speaking of which, Ohio State loses its running backs coach, Tony Alford, to Michigan. And so it's my understanding in regards to what you just brought up with Chip Kelly is that Chip Kelly's going to have a lot of autonomy and say over not just play calling, but they really sold it as, hey, this is your offense, meaning if something like this does happen, which it was not anticipated necessarily, although at the same time, a lot of people around Columbus think, well, everybody got sizable raises on both sides of the football except for Tony Alford, so they
Yep.
didn't mind him leaving. But that Chip Kelly is going to pretty much have his say in
Mhm.
interviewing and uh, adding a running back coach. So they really want him to take control of the offense and have a large investment in it.
Yeah, I think what he was talking about is probably just trying to just to not ruffle feathers. I feel like that's what he needs to say. He's like, this is going to be collaborative. I'm not going to come and try to take over with my offense. That way, it just doesn't ruffle any feathers. Because one of the people he mentioned that he spoke with was Alford. In those discussions, specifically mentioned Tony Alford, Keenan Bailey, and Heartline when constructing that. So yeah, it'll be interesting, but that's more of an indication there that he's going to be the guy, and no matter how much of a collaborative effort this is, it's probably still going to look somewhat like a Chip Kelly offense.